There's a wealth-building strategy so powerful that it has created more millionaires than almost any other investment vehicle, yet most people never fully understand how it works. It doesn't require a business degree from Harvard. It doesn't demand connections to Wall Street. And it doesn't need you to time the stock market perfectly. What it does require is understanding one simple concept that the wealthy have used for generations: leverage. Not the dangerous kind that destroys fortunes, but the specific type of leverage that transforms ordinary income into permanent wealth. The kind where someone else pays off your debt while you build equity. The kind where the tax code actually rewards you instead of punishing you. The kind where time becomes your greatest ally instead of your enemy. This is the story of how rental property leverage works, why it's accessible to regular people, and how it builds wealth in ways that feel almost too good to be true. But first, we need to understand what leverage actually means. The foundation, understanding real leverage. When most people hear the word leverage, they think about risk. They picture over-leveraged homeowners during the financial crisis of 2008, losing everything when property values collapsed. They remember stories of people drowning in debt. And they're not entirely wrong to be cautious. Leverage, when misused, destroys wealth faster than almost anything else. But when we talk about rental property leverage, we're talking about something fundamentally different. We're talking about using borrowed money to control an asset that generates income and appreciates in value, while someone else pays down your debt. Let me give you the simplest possible example. You want to buy a rental property worth $300,000. You don't have $300,000 in cash. But you do have $60,000 for a 20% down payment. You borrow the remaining $240,000 from a bank at, let's say, 5% interest over 30 years. Now here's where it gets interesting. That property generates rental income. Let's say you can rent it for $2,500 per month. After you pay the mortgage, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and all other expenses, you might clear $200 to $400 per month in actual cash flow. Not life-changing money, right? But here's what most people miss. That's just the beginning. Because you're not just earning that monthly cash flow. You're actually making money in 4 completely different ways simultaneously. And these 4 profit centers working together create returns that dwarf what you can earn from almost any other investment. Let's break down each one, because this is where the magic happens. The first profit center is the obvious one: monthly cash flow. That $200 to $400 you're clearing each month after all expenses. Over a year, that's $2,400 to $4,800. On your $60,000 investment, that's a 4 to 8% cash-on-cash return. Not spectacular, but not terrible either. It's passive income that shows up whether you're sleeping, working your day job, or on vacation. But cash flow is actually the smallest piece of the wealth-building puzzle. The second profit center is appreciation. Real estate, historically, appreciates at around 3 to 5% per year over long periods. Some years it's more, some years less, but the long-term trend is upward. Here's the key part. Appreciation applies to the entire property value, not just your down payment. If that $300,000 property appreciates at just 4% per year, it gains $12,000 in value. But remember, you only put down $60,000. That $12,000 gain on your $60,000 investment is a 20% return. And you didn't do anything to earn it except own the property. Based on the historical data from the Federal Housing Finance Agency, home prices in the United States have consistently risen over decades, with the average home appreciating by approximately 5.4% annually since 1991. This appreciation compounds year after year, turning modest initial investments into substantial equity over time. The third profit center is mortgage paydown, and this is where people's minds start to explode. Every month, when your tenant pays rent, a portion of that money goes toward paying down the principal balance on your mortgage. In the first years of a 30-year mortgage, this amount is relatively small, maybe $300 to $400 per month on a $240,000 loan. But here's the beautiful part. You're not paying it, your tenant is paying it. Let me repeat that because it's critical. Your tenant is buying the property for you. Every single month, they're handing you money that reduces your loan balance and increases your equity. That $300 to $400 per month adds up to roughly $4,000 to $5,000 per year in forced savings. Money that goes straight into building your equity without coming out of your pocket. And as the years go by, an increasing percentage of each payment goes toward principal instead of interest. By year 12 of a typical 30-year mortgage, you reach a tipping point where more than half of each payment reduces your debt rather than paying interest. By year 20, the majority of your rental income is building equity at an accelerating rate. The fourth profit center is tax benefits, and this is where the government actually helps you build wealth. Real estate investment comes with enormous tax advantages that salaried employees simply don't get. The biggest is depreciation. The IRS allows you to depreciate residential rental property over 27.5 years. This means you can deduct a portion of the property's value each year as a paper loss, even though the property isn't actually losing value. Let's use our $300,000 property as an example. If you allocate $200,000 of that value to the building and improvements, not including land, you can depreciate roughly $7,300 per year. That's a $7,300 deduction against your rental income without spending a penny. If you're in the 24% tax bracket, that depreciation alone saves you around $1,750 per year in taxes. But it doesn't stop there. You can also deduct mortgage interest, property taxes, insurance, repairs, maintenance, property management fees, utilities you pay, advertising costs, and even the mileage you drive to and from the property. For the 2024 tax year, that mileage deduction was 67 cents per mile. All of these deductions reduce your taxable income, allowing you to keep more of the cash flow the property generates. The tax code is designed to incentivize real estate investment, and savvy investors use these benefits to amplify their returns dramatically. Now let's add these four profit centers together. Monthly cash flow, let's say $3,000 per year. Appreciation at 4%. $12,000 per year. Mortgage paydown, $4,500 per year. Tax savings from depreciation and deductions, $2,000 per year. Total annual benefit, $21,500. On your initial $60,000 investment, that's a 35.8% total return. And that's being conservative with the numbers. This is why real estate has created so many millionaires. It's not because any single benefit is extraordinary. It's because these four profit centers compound together, working simultaneously, creating returns that are difficult to match with any other investment vehicle. The stock market might give you 8 to 10% annually on average, if you're lucky. Bonds might give you 3 to 5%. But real estate, when you use leverage properly, can deliver returns in the 25 to 40% range year after year. And unlike stocks, you have control. You can force appreciation by improving the property. You can increase cash flow by raising rents or reducing expenses. You can accelerate mortgage paydown by applying extra payments to principal. You control your destiny in ways that simply aren't possible with paper assets. The scaling strategy. From one property to financial independence, one rental property generating $20,000 per year in total returns is nice, but it's not life-changing. The real wealth comes from scaling this strategy. And here's where leverage becomes even more powerful. After you've owned that first property for a few years, something magical happens. The property has appreciated, let's say by $40,000 over 5 years. Your tenant has paid down $30,000 of your mortgage. You've built $70,000 in equity, not counting your original down payment. Now you can tap that equity. You can refinance the property, pulling out some of that built-up equity as cash. Or you can take out a home equity line of credit. That cash becomes the down payment for your second rental property. You just use the wealth created by your first property to buy your second property. And now you have 2 properties working for you, 2 properties generating cash flow, 2 properties appreciating, 2 properties with tenants paying down mortgages, 2 properties generating tax benefits. You've doubled your wealth-building engine without investing any new money from your own pocket. Wait 3 more years and repeat the process. Now you own 3 properties, then 4, then 5. Each property feeds the next. Each property accelerates your path to financial independence. The math gets exciting fast. Let's say each property generates $20,000 per year in total returns. 5 properties generate $100,000 per year. 10 properties generate $200,000 per year. And here's the beautiful part. Most of this is on taxable income in the early years because depreciation offsets it. You rebuilding wealth at a rate that would require earning hundreds of thousands of dollars per year in salary to match, but your tax bill stays surprisingly low. This concept, often called the BRRR strategy in real estate circles, which stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, has helped countless investors build portfolios worth millions starting with relatively modest initial investments. The strategy leverages both borrowed money and the equity you've created to compound your growth exponentially. The timeline to financial independence varies depending on your market, your down payment size, and how aggressively you want to scale. But let's look at a realistic scenario. You start with one property at age 35, putting down $60,000 you've saved. You add one property every 18 months using equity from your existing properties. By age 40, you own 4 properties. By age 45, you own 7 properties. By age 50, you own 10 properties. At that point, your 10 properties have a combined value of $3 million, assuming modest appreciation. Your tenants have paid down roughly $600,000 of your mortgages over those 15 years. Your total equity, counting both appreciation and paydown, is roughly $1.5 million. Your monthly cash flow from all properties combined is around $4,000, or $48,000 per year. But remember, that's just the cash flow, the smallest piece. Your total annual wealth increase from all 4 profit centers is approximately $200,000 per year. You can retire comfortably on the cash flow alone. Or you can keep the properties and let them continue appreciating, knowing that in another 15 years, when the mortgages are paid off, your cash flow will jump to $15,000 to $20,000 per month. You've built permanent wealth that generates income for the rest of your life and can be passed on to your children. This isn't theoretical. This is the exact path that hundreds of thousands of real estate investors have followed. Many of them started with less than you might think, often with down payments between $40,000 and $80,000 on their first property, saved over several years of working regular jobs. The real world. Examples and mistakes to avoid. Let's talk about real examples, because understanding how this works in practice helps clarify both the power and the pitfalls. Take the case of a teacher in Ohio who started investing in 2010. She bought a modest single-family home for $170,000 with a $34,000 down payment. She rented it for $1,400 per month. After mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance reserves, she cleared about $250 per month in cash flow. Not much, but over the next 5 years, 3 things happened. The property appreciated to $220,000. Her tenants paid down $25,000 of her mortgage. And she saved an additional $18,000 from her teaching salary. She refinanced the property, pulling out $45,000 in equity. She combined that with her savings and purchased a second property. Then she repeated the process. By 2020, just 10 years after her first purchase, she owned 5 properties with a combined equity of over $600,000. Her monthly cash flow exceeded $3,000. She kept teaching because she loved it, but she no longer had to. The rental income provided financial security that her teacher's pension never could have. Or consider a young couple in Florida who started with a duplex in 2015. They bought it for $240,000, lived in one unit, and rented out the other. This strategy, called house hacking, allowed them to qualify for owner-occupied financing with just a 5% down payment of $12,000. The rent from the other unit covered more than half their mortgage. They lived essentially for free while building equity. After 2 years, they moved out, rented both units, and used the equity they'd built to buy another duplex. They repeated this process 3 times. By 2023, they owned 4 duplexes, a total of 8 rental units. Their combined equity exceeded $700,000. Their monthly cash flow was around $5,000. And they were both still in their early 30s. These aren't get-rich-quick stories. These are get-rich-steadily stories. The wealth builds gradually, month by month, year by year. But it builds with a reliability that few other investment strategies can match. But let's also talk about mistakes, because leverage amplifies losses as much as it amplifies gains if you're not careful. The biggest mistake is buying in the wrong market. If you buy in a market with weak rental demand, you'll struggle to keep your property occupied. Vacancy destroys cash flow faster than anything else. Every month a property sits empty, you're paying the full mortgage, taxes, and insurance out of your own pocket. 3 or 4 months of vacancy can wipe out an entire year's worth of profits. This could suggest the importance of thorough market research before purchasing any rental property. The second mistake is underestimating expenses. New investors consistently overestimate rental income and underestimate costs. They forget about vacancy. They lowball maintenance and repairs. They don't budget for capital expenditures like replacing a roof or an HVAC system. A good rule of thumb, often called the 50% rule, suggests that roughly half of your gross rental income will go toward operating expenses, not including the mortgage. If you're not accounting for this, you're setting yourself up for negative cash flow and financial stress. The third mistake is over-leveraging. Yes, leverage is powerful, but too much leverage is dangerous. If you're stretched so thin that a single vacancy or major repair puts you into financial crisis, you've over-leveraged. Conservative investors aim to keep their loan-to-value ratio at 80% or below, ensuring they have a cushion of equity to weather downturns. The fourth mistake is treating rental property like a passive investment. It's not. It requires management. Tenants need to be screened carefully. Properties need to be maintained. Repairs need to be handled promptly. If you're not willing to do this work yourself, you need to budget for a property manager, which typically costs 8 to 12% of monthly rent for long-term properties. Many investors fail because they underestimate the time and effort required, or they fail to account for management costs in their financial projections. Why this strategy remains accessible? You might be thinking, this all sounds great, but property prices are higher than ever. How can ordinary people still use this strategy? It's a fair question. The answer is that while absolute prices are higher, the fundamentals of leverage haven't changed. Yes, you need a larger down payment today than you did 20 years ago. A $60,000 to $75,000 down payment is now common for properties in many markets, where $30,000 to $40,000 might have sufficed in the past. But incomes have also risen. Rental rates have risen. And mortgage rates, while higher than their historic lows, are still reasonable by historical standards. The key is starting. The biggest mistake people make is waiting for the perfect time, the perfect property, or the perfect market conditions. There is no perfect time. Markets cycle up and down. What matters is time in the market, not timing the market. Consider the inflation hedge that real estate provides. When inflation rises, as it has significantly in recent years, real estate acts as a natural hedge. Rents increase with inflation. Property values increase with inflation, but your mortgage payment stays fixed. This means inflation actually helps real estate investors by eroding the real value of their debt while increasing their income and asset value. If you took out a mortgage in 2015 with a monthly payment of $2,000, that payment is still $2,000 today. But $2,000 in 2015 bought significantly more than $2,000 in 2025. Meanwhile, rent that was perhaps $1,800 in 2015 might be $2,800 today. The gap between your fixed mortgage cost and your rising rental income widens year after year, and this could suggest that long-term real estate investors benefit substantially from inflation, while fixed-income investments lose purchasing power. Additionally, financing options remain available for first-time real estate investors. Conventional mortgages typically require 20 to 25% down for investment properties, but owner-occupied financing through FHA loans can require as little as 3.5% down. The house hacking strategy mentioned earlier allows investors to start with minimal capital, live in one unit of a multifamily property, and rent the others. Other creative financing methods exist as well. Seller financing, where the property seller acts as the lender, can sometimes reduce down payment requirements. Private money lenders, often found through local real estate investment groups, may offer flexible terms. Partnerships, where one person provides capital and another provides management, allow investors to enter the market without needing the full down payment themselves. The barriers to entry exist, but they're not insurmountable for people willing to save, learn, and take measured risks. The psychological shift required, there's something else we need to address, something that holds people back more than lack of capital or knowledge. It's the psychological shift required to embrace debt as a wealth-building tool. We're taught from childhood that debt is bad, and for consumer debt that's largely true. Credit card debt at 20% interest used to buy depreciating assets like cars and electronics is absolutely terrible. But investment debt is fundamentally different. When you borrow money at 5% to buy an asset that generates income, appreciates in value, provides tax benefits, and has someone else pay down your debt, that's not bad debt. That's smart leverage. It's using the bank's money to build your wealth. The wealthy understand this distinction instinctively. They borrow at low rates to buy assets that return higher rates. The middle class, unfortunately, often does the opposite. They borrow at high rates to buy liabilities. The shift required is recognizing that a mortgage on a rental property is not like credit card debt. It's a tool, and when used properly, it's one of the most powerful wealth-building tools available to regular people. Another psychological hurdle is the fear of being a landlord. People imagine nightmare tenants, late-night phone calls about broken pipes, and endless stress. And yes, bad tenants exist. Yes, problems arise. But the reality is far less dramatic than the stereotype. Proper tenant screening eliminates most problem tenants. A thorough application process, including credit checks, employment verification, and previous landlord references, filters out high-risk renters. Clear lease agreements establish expectations. And property management companies can handle the day-to-day for investors who don't want the direct involvement. The key is treating real estate investing as a business, not a hobby. Professional landlords have systems, processes, and boundaries. They don't let emotions guide their decisions. They follow their procedures, enforce their leases consistently, and maintain their properties proactively. When approached this way, rental property ownership is far more predictable and manageable than most people fear. The long view, building generational wealth, perhaps. The most powerful aspect of rental property leverage is its ability to create generational wealth. Wealth that lasts beyond your lifetime. Wealth that provides security for your children and grandchildren. When you pay off rental properties over 30 years, you don't just end up with income-producing assets. You end up with assets that can be passed down, providing income for your heirs while continuing to appreciate. This is how wealthy families maintain wealth across generations. They own real estate. They collect rental income. They pass properties to their children, who collect rental income and pass properties to their children. A property you buy at age 35 could still be generating income for your grandchildren when they re-adults. That single decision to buy one rental property and leverage it properly could impact your family for the next 100 years. And because of something called a step-up in basis, your heirs won't even owe capital gains taxes on the appreciation that occurred during your lifetime, if they inherit the property. The tax code rewards long-term real estate ownership in ways it rewards few other investments. The power of leverage in real estate isn't magic, it's math. Math that has been proven over decades, across countless investors in every kind of market. The math of using a small amount of your money to control a large asset. The math of someone else paying down your debt while you build equity. The math of tax deductions reducing your burden while your wealth grows. The math of appreciation compounding year after year on the full property value, not just your down payment. The math of for-profit centers working simultaneously, creating returns that far exceed what the cash flow alone would suggest. When you understand this math, real estate leverage stops looking risky and starts looking like one of the few reliable paths to financial independence available to regular people who are untech entrepreneurs or trust fund beneficiaries. The rental trick isn't really a trick at all. It's a system. A system that requires some initial capital, a willingness to learn, the patience to build wealth gradually rather than quickly, and the courage to take on productive debt rather than avoiding all debt out of fear. But for those willing to embrace this system, the rewards are substantial. Financial independence, freedom from depending on a job for every dollar, security for your family, and the knowledge that time is working for you instead of against you. Every month that passes, your tenants are buying more of your properties for you. Every month that passes, inflation is eroding your debt while increasing your income. Every month that passes, you're building equity that can be leveraged into even more properties. This is how ordinary people build extraordinary wealth. Not through salary alone, not through hoping their stock picks go up, but through the power of rental property leverage, patiently applied over time. If this has changed how you think about wealth building, if you've learned something that could change your financial future, do me a favor and hit that like button. And if you want to learn more about finance history and the strategies that actually create wealth, subscribe to Market Memories. Because the patterns repeat, the lessons remain, and the people who understand history position themselves to benefit from it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.